So before we wrap up this module and course, let me talk about some MVVM toolkits or frameworks that are out there that you can leverage so that you don't have to write a bunch of repetitive code to implement the MVVM pattern yourself. The first one that I'm intimately familiar with is the Prism framework. This was first developed by Microsoft Patterns and Practices, and I was actually part of the team building that, from the very first version up through current day. And current day, it has been turned into an open source project of which I'm one of the owners. So obviously, I will have an inherent bias when discussing MVVM toolkits. The second one that's a fantastic toolkit is the MVVM Lite toolkit. MVVM Lite is produced by Laurent Bugnon, and in fact there is a whole course on this in the Pluralsight library that you can check out. The next one to mention that's also equally popular is Caliburn Micro. This is another small open source framework that helps you to implement the MVVM pattern and also supports a number of things out of the box. Now I'm going to go into a little more depth on Prism here because it's the one I'm most familiar with, and to give you a sense of the kinds of things these MVVM toolkits or frameworks can do for you. Prism has a number of features out of the box. One of those is various kinds of support for the MVVM pattern. It has a bindable base class similar to the one that we implemented in this course. It has a flexible view model locator that has conventions to it but allows you to override those conventions and declaratively hook up your views and view models in a loosely coupled way. Another feature Prism has is modularity. It's the ability to break up your code into totally loosely coupled class libraries and parts and bring them together at runtime into a cohesive whole for the end user while the code remains fully decoupled. Prism also supports the notion of UI composition and regions, the ability to plug views into containers without the view that's doing the plugging needing to have an explicit reference to the UI container itself. Prism has navigation features that layer on top of regions that give you things like forward and back navigation and a navigation stack, and allowing your view models to participate in the navigation process directly. Prism has commands, so they have a delegate command that's very similar to the relay command we've been using throughout the course, except it's got some extra robustness to protect you from memory leaks if your views and view models have different lifetimes, as well as a separate command implementation called composite command that lets you do commanding in a more loosely coupled way across components. And finally, Prism has support for pub/sub events. These are loosely coupled events where the publisher and subscriber can have different lifetimes and do not have to have explicit references to each other to communicate through events. Now, if you want to dive into more detail on Prism, the good news is my co-owner of the Prism open source project, Brian Lagunas, has a series of courses on Prism in the Pluralsight library. So if you just go check out his author profile here, you'll find a bunch of courses that you can use to dive into Prism in depth.